I'm going to take a look at the buttonhole, automatic buttonhole attachment here. That's a cam that fits over the Elna graph, and I found a little manual. I think this one's for the beigey sort of browny coloured Elna Supermatic, which I may do in another video. But what I did notice when I was having a look through here is it's got the little instruction book for the buttonhole, automatic buttonhole feature. So I thought I'd have a go at that. Now I've done, so what they recommend is that you install this cam here. I'll show you how to do that in a second. Also they recommend here, let's have a close look here, this special buttonhole foot here, and it's got a little guide with a shaft and a little guide to show when you're at the end of the buttonhole there. And I have part of that. I have this, which is missing the actual foot itself, presser foot there. So I've actually got two, and they're the same. It looks like the pin has fallen out and the foot's dropped off and gone missing. So I can't use that, and you know, the whole idea is you put this, it's got little graduated marks on there, 2, 2.5, 3, right up to 5, and you slide that in through here like that and lock it with the knurled screw there, and that just is a bit of a guide. But that's, as you can see, it's broken or missing part. So what I've got here is I've got the buttonholing foot, and this seems to work okay. I've done a few test runs. The first run I did, I couldn't quite work out why the buttonhole was not always zigzagging, and if you have a look on this cam here, you'll see that there's actually, you know, there should be a lobe every one, you know, how many other, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lobes. Well, this has only got 8 because one's broken here, broken off. So when the cam came around to this area here, it would just do straight stitching down the left hand side and then carry on zigzagging. And the effect of that was, it looked like it was mis-stitching or slip stitching. You can see here it's been going along zigzag, zigzag, and then it also straight, zigzag, straight, zigzag, straight, and it was consistently like that. So you can see it here as well. So yeah, finally I worked out that that little lobe has been broken off. I assume someone's tried to force it in while the stitch length and the width were not set on 0. There's parts in there that could stop you from putting it in. Anyway, I found another buttonhole attachment. So I'm just, also I thought, you know, it'd be quite cool to use some of this old thread here. I'm assuming that that is, that's a mercerized cotton. So, you know, quite nice thread, and but it's quite thick. And I noticed that when I was practicing these buttonholes, that the there's no gap in between. So when you come along with your buttonhole cutter here, yeah, I think it's cutting some of those threads, which is not ideal. You don't want that. Yeah, it's cut the threads there. So this is, I found that too close. And you can't really set the width off 2. You have to set it to 2, the width. So I tried this embroidery type thread, Madeira embroidery type thread. It's quite fine, and I put it on the spool holder to start with, but I found that because the spool's quite heavy and whatnot, you know, when it goes to pull the thread off, it's got to spin the whole spool. It's quite heavy, so it adds tension. So what I ended up doing is I put the thread onto a stand here. You can buy these stands here. They're like a you know, thread stand, for quite handy for using industrial thread cones and whatnot, and you just sit it in behind the machine. Yeah, pretty handy for if you want to use bulk, you know, the bigger cones, which is obviously a lot cheaper. You know, if you're using a lot of one colour, that's probably the cheapest way to buy it. Buy one of these as well, and you just sit it in behind the machine there. Just a lot more economical way of buying thread rather than the little spools like, you know, this metrocene here. That's, you know, or Metler, yeah, Metler and metrocene. It's quite expensive. It's 150 meters. You know, it's an expensive way to buy thread, really. If you're using a lot of thread, I'd suggest buying the industrial cones. So I did a wee test run with the embroidery type thread, and the results, you know, came out really quite good, I thought. It looks close, but when you cut one, it actually comes up pretty good. No cut threads there, and there's no fabric in between. I mean, that's probably one of the best buttonholes I've seen. There are machines around that will do really nice buttonholes like this. The Boninas are really good for doing very nice buttonholes. Obviously this model. Some of the Singers do really nice buttonholes. So yeah, nice buttonhole's always good if you can achieve that. So let's go through the process of setting this up. So I've wound a bobbin with the embroidery thread there. I've threaded the machine. That's coming through there. Yep. Threaded the machine with the embroidery thread. Attached the buttonhole foot here. Like so. The manual suggests too, which is quite important, make sure the width is on 0. The stitch length is on 0, and that this little lever, now this only works with the model that's got this little mechanism here. If you have a look at my other, I think it's in the basics video, I'll link that in down below. Some models came without this, so this attachment wouldn't work in that case. But in this case, make sure that this little lever here springs up and across, is to the left of this little pin here, right? And then remove any discs that might be in there. So, and then it's very similar to the other Elna discs. Is this little slot here locates onto this pin. So there's a little mark here, a little cutout in the inner ring there. Cutout shows you where the hole is, and it's a little bit tricky. You've got to get this, so you put that over the shaft there, but this little fork here has got to come down and over the little lever here, over this little lever, and then also got to line up that there. So I'm just turning the lower, I'm turning that cam that turns separately until that little notch here is over the roughly where that cam is, where the little locator pin is there. Push that down, making sure that this fork is down either side of this lever. Push it down, it clips in, and so that part's ready to go. You hook this little lever over and onto this pin here. There's a little hole in the lever onto that pin, and you set the needle positioning to the left, fully to the left. You bring the stitch length dial right down onto A, and you'll notice that I haven't got the balancing. I've actually balanced the buttonhole because I found, I'll show you actually on the standard setting, the first bar, the left bar, was too narrow, too close together. Yeah, I think this is probably a good example. This is when it was missing I had the cam in that was missing the lobes. So it was very close here. Coming down here, we do the bottom bar, and then coming back up, it was quite a long stitch length. It was longer. So I balanced that out by bringing this up towards plus, and that's just a matter of trial and error. That's, you know, why I've done all this here. It's just a matter of trial and error. So trying different balancing, different tensions. I've set the bobbin tension a little bit higher than normal. Bobbin tension's on about 1.5. This embroidery thread's quite fragile, so you just have to be a bit careful with it. Oh, by the way, I've got the top tension on about 3, so that seems to be pretty good. Set the width to 2. I've actually started just moving this lever here because I suspect that's why some of these knobs might have pulled off. You know, you've got to, especially when returning back to 0, which I'll show you, it's actually quite tight and it's putting a lot of strain on this knob. And I think, you know, just if you want to save this from coming off, I'll just tend to move this with this actual lever here. Because when you're coming down to 0, that's actually quite tight, and I think that's putting too much stress on that. So 0 resets anyway, but let's start on 2. Okay. There's the first bar down the left there. Then we go to 4. Do the bottom bar. Just a few stitches there. When you're changing the width lever too, just bring the needle out of the work. So I'm putting the width down to 2. Let's go back up the home straight there. Now I've overshot a little bit there. You do have to be careful because when you go back to 4 again to do the top bar, it's going to continue feeding backwards. And then you go back to 0. You can do tying off stitches. I'm not going to bother with that. You know, you do a couple of tying off stitches. But even if you don't do the tying off stitches, you should always take the this back to 0. It resets the system. And there we have, you can see there that I overshot. So when you're coming back up this direction here, you've kind of got to keep an eye out for the start of the buttonhole, because you want to stop before the start of the buttonhole gets to the needle, so that you've got a little bit of, because it's going to carry on in backwards direction, you want to make sure that it completes at the start here, if you know what I mean. So once you've finished the buttonhole, it needs to be you know, more like that level there. So, and you can see there that the balance is out as well. So I'm just going to bring this up here. Now I found I didn't quite need it at maximum. I just backed it off a little bit from maximum there. Okay, so width back to 2 for the first bar. And 4 for the bottom bar, a few stitches there, back to 2 for the home straight. And then 4 again for the final bar, and then 0 to reset and do tying stitches if you want. Yeah, that's a pretty nice little buttonhole. It's pulling a little bit here. You know, this is only 2 layers of fabric. Normally if you're doing buttonholes you'd be doing them on a placket or something like that, so you know, generally a placket would have interfacing stabilizer in there and you know, at least 2 layers of fabric. So but in this case, you know, you just want to maybe drop the tension down to maybe 1. I'll try that. But and then you get your this what I've always called it quick unpick. So you know, good for unpicking, but in the manual they call it a button cutter, a buttonhole cutter. So yeah, pretty handy. Just stab that through there. Try not to stab your fingers. Done that a few times. And then just up there. Just up there like that. Some people will put a pin at the top to stop cutting too far and cutting the top bar there. But you can, if you're careful, just judge it. And there we have a very nice little buttonhole. I mean, that almost looks professional to me. I've worked in factories with you know, industrial buttonhole machines, and you know, they don't do much better than that. So I'll drop the tension down. Let's just have another wee go there. Up to 2. Four. 2 again. Waiting for the end of the buttonhole to show. There we go. 4. A few stitches there. Reset to 0 here on the width, and that's looking even better. Let's have a wee look at this one. Amazing. Probably best buttonhole I've seen, maybe for a domestic. Might have cut a couple of threads there though. Instead of cutting the buttonhole with one of these, which you know looks like I might have just trimmed a little thread there, maybe part of it anyway. You can use it's almost like a chisel type, just a little chisel, and you put the buttonhole down on a piece of wood, and you just give the chisel, position the chisel down the slot there, and just give it a hit. That way you're less likely to cut these threads here, and so I suspect in that case it wouldn't have done that. So I'll try it with standard thread now, just to see what we get. I'll try just this white, fairly cheap thread. It's not bad quality, it's a medium sort of quality. It's not flash, it's not too cheap. So let's see what we get with that. Look who's turned up. Can I have my piece of material back, please? Molly? Come on. Yeah. Oh. That's standard thread, not overly flash thread, but that's done a really good buttonhole as well. Probably see a little bit of orange. That's because I've got the bobbin thread still on orange, but you can see on the back that there's not a lot of orange visible there. That's because the lower thread is quite tight, the orange lower thread is quite tight, and the white upper thread is quite loose, so the tight thread is pulling the loose thread through to the underneath. And that's ideal for buttonholes. I mean, no one's going to see the back of the buttonholes. I mean, you might do for any button that's unbuttoned maybe, and maybe if the placket sort of turned out slightly. So you might want to take care on the bottom tension there, you know, with the same colour on the bottom thread there, and a bit of balancing. You could make the back look nicer as well. Automatic buttonhole attachment. I'd call it semi-automatic. It's not fully automatic. Yeah. So, and just to reset the machine back, you would bring that to 0. You push that lever in and up to 0. Flip this back, and then just down there, or use the little fork, and away you go. So I hope you liked that video on the automatic, in quotes, buttonhole attachment for the Elna Supermatic. Please subscribe, and if you would like notifications of more videos, please click the little bell icon below the video here. And I'm also now on Patreon if you'd like to support the making of these videos. Please have a look at the link down below in the description. Thanks a lot for watching.